Hi everybody, David here for the last assignment of our course 711, and this is proper size and scale of political order. What is the right size of a government? This is something called the Goldilocks effect. A government can be too big, can be too small, or it can be just right. According to Professor Don Livingston in our Liberty University video, Proper Size and Scale of Political Order in the Modern World, there are two answers. They are Aristotelian. I have trouble with this word. The Aristotelian tradition is that a government should be small enough where the people know each other. According to Hobbes, it should be large enough where the king, using his absolute monarchy, can be in complete control. Hobbes believed that without a strong government, mankind would descend into what he referred to as anarchy. The lives of ordinary folk would be one of terror and of oppression. One can picture the post-Civil War South, where Republican governments were taken over one by the mob of people. At the same time, newly freed blacks lived in terror for their lives. As those Republican governments disappeared, the Klan was able to terrorize these new citizens. Hobbes said the governments are the solution to the worst possible solutions human beings could find of themselves. Essentially, Hobbes called it anarchy. Ronald Reagan once said, "Government isn't the solution to our problems. Government is the problems." So how did we go from being too small to protect our citizens to being so big that we became, in the words of economist James A. Kahneman, inefficient as a government? Well, the Industrial Revolution in America began before the Civil War, but it really took off after Civil War, where many people moved to the cities from the countryside, some from foreign countries, and they all moved to the cities for those industrialized jobs. So we get a shifting of populations that by the 1890s, you see many more people living in the city under urbanization. And by 1929, when the Great Depression hits, most Americans are living in the cities and very few of them are living out in the countryside. So when the full effect of the Great Depression hits in 1932, the government was forced to act to ensure that the unemployed did not turn to violence to feed their families. One example of that would be in 1932, World War I veterans march on Washington in the same form that Cox's army did during the Depression of 1893. But in 1932, with these bonus army marchers, the government was so worried about mob rule, as it was referred to in Andrew Jackson's time, that Hoover called out the army to disperse these veterans. And that did not play out very well for Hoover in the press, but it kind of gave an inkling to the fear people had of anarchy. The result to combat this was an increase in the size of government. One example was the rapid expansion of the federal government was the actual checks that the Treasury Department was printing. Before the Roosevelt administration of the Great Depression, the federal government was very small and they would print a few hundred checks. With the millions of people added to the federal roll, the federal government not only ran out of paper, it ran out of ink to print these new paychecks. And the New Deal left us with programs that we're still familiar with today, like Social Security, Securities and Exchange Commission, and FDIC for our savings account. At the same time, there were programs that were dismantled while they were in effect, such as the WPA, known as the Works Progress Administration, and the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Those two were deemed by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional. So after World War II, we have this expanded federal government, and it's met by this expanded population we now refer to as the baby boomers. And these boomers, by the time they reach the early 2000s, are beginning to retire, and they're beginning to tax a system that was not meant to carry this level of weight. So by 2007, the Social Security system is actually beginning to run a deficit due to the number of people on those federal rolls. And I'm a big fan of the system, but what James A. Kahn, the economist, is arguing, governments may distort private decisions and push economies away from efficient outcomes. In other words, he feels that we've reached that point where we're too big, and it may just be time to take Social Security and privatize it, and then move to what Goldilocks said is just the right size.